There was a time when the world wasn't a collection of data, calculations, and formulas. Everything had a face, every force of nature, a mood, a will, a temper. The sea wasn't water moved by currents and pressure, but an unpredictable God deciding who would live and who would drown. The moon wasn't a rock hanging in space, but a silent goddess watching over the nights of men. Every star, every gust of wind, every storm was the manifestation of an invisible power. For millennia, existence was explained through stories passed on by word of mouth. Stories that didn't explain, but comforted. Stories that didn't enlighten, but blinded. In that world of sacred narratives, life was a fragile balance between the need to survive and the constant fear of offending some divinity. If the harvest failed, it was divine wrath. If children died, it was a mysterious punishment. If the sea raged, it wasn't the wind. It was the god of the waters taking revenge. Every gesture, every breath, was weighed down by the anxiety of a god always ready to strike. And yet, at some point, something cracked. Some men stopped accepting these versions of reality. They were no longer satisfied with seeing Zeus in the lightning or divine moods in the rain. They started looking at the world with different eyes. They weren't searching for stories, but for causes. They didn't want consolation. They wanted truth. That's where everything changes. That's where the rift opens, between those who prefer the certainty of myth and those who choose the vertigo of free thought. That's where human thought begins to walk on its own, even at the risk of falling. A silent revolution that would forever change the fate of mankind. The birth of philosophy. It wasn't an organized project. There was no clear plan. There were only men who dared to doubt. They were in a particular land, Ionia, a crossroads of peoples, trade, and ideas. Ships arrived from Egypt, Phoenicia, Mesopotamia, bringing not only goods but also knowledge and foreign wisdom. In that atmosphere of exchange and contamination, something new emerged, the possibility of looking beyond the fables. There, in Miletus, a city buzzing with commerce and contradictions, the gods still had temples and sacrifices, but a question began to spread, one that offered no escape. What if the gods weren't the ones holding the world together? What if the laws of existence were written elsewhere, not in the whims of a pantheon, but in the very things themselves? Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes, names that sound distant and dusty today, but at that time they were earthquakes. Thales, looking at water, didn't see a gift from Poseidon, but the principle that sustains all life. Anaximander spoke of an undefined principle, the apeiron, not divine in the traditional sense, but vaster, impersonal, unreachable. Anaximenes found in air the invisible foundation of everything. These weren't perfect formulas or proven truths, but a new gesture, explaining reality with reality. That was their audacity. They didn't kneel before myths. They didn't ask the gods for permission. They faced the world without fear of finding it empty of consolation. It was there that thought split from legend and philosophy was born. No longer inherited stories, but inquiry, observation, hypotheses. For the Greeks of the time, these ideas were madness. How could there be a cosmos without gods? How could thunder not be the act of Zeus, but the clash of masses of air? It was a scandalous thought, almost blasphemous. And yet, from that fracture, a path opened that never closed again. Out of it came Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and everything we now call philosophy and science. The pre-Socratics weren't modern scientists ahead of their time. Many of their theories were naive, even bizarre. They believed in absolute elements, in principles that today hold no validity. But their strength wasn't in the answers. They lay in the gesture itself. in the refusal to accept a world already explained by myths, in the will to see with their own eyes, even at the risk of being wrong. That gesture, in the end, is the true beginning of free thought, accepting the risk of living without a comforting story, living in the nakedness of questions, without the protection of a God ready to give meaning. This is where the modern human is born, in the courage to say that reality doesn't need fables, but clarity. In a sense, philosophy is the child of trauma, discovering that the world does not answer, that there is no voice in the sky ready to reveal the why of things. The first philosophers heard the silence of the universe, and instead of running away, they turned it into the ground of a new way of thinking. While their fellow citizens sacrificed animals to the gods for rain or fertility, they looked up at the sky and searched for a hidden law. They were thirsty for truth. This is where the distance between myth and logos begins. A slow passage from telling stories to seeking rational explanations. Philosophy did not give security. In fact, it took certainties away. It did not provide answers, but it taught how to endure endless questions. This legacy does not belong only to a distant past. Every time ready-made explanations are refused, every time one looks beyond the comforting stories society constructs, the pre-Socratic gesture lives again. Every time one asks whether things truly are as they are told, that revolution begun in Miletus continues. Today, myths are no longer Zeus and Poseidon, but they have other names: progress, success, blind faith, political narratives, media illusions. No goats are offered to the gods anymore, but entire lives are offered to work, to careers, to appearances. The stories that blind the eyes have not disappeared, they've only changed costumes. And so the pre-Socratics still speak. Their lesson is not in the formulas they left, but in the courage to ask, is this really so? Is the world truly what we're told it is? Do the certainties imposed on us have real ground, or are they just modern stories? They did not give definitive answers, but they left a method. Don't believe, investigate. Don't accept, observe. Don't delude yourself, but think. This is why the day some men decided not to kneel before the gods marked the beginning of a different kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever one wants, but the harsher freedom to look at the world without fables. Philosophy was born this way, from an act of defiance, an act of clarity, an act of courage. Perhaps this is the true legacy of the pre-Socratics, accepting that the world owes us nothing, that it explains nothing, and that it's up to us to bear the weight of a reality without stories to protect us. It's a lesson that still unsettles and frees, because it means living without illusions, living with the knowledge that there are no gods to guarantee the harvest, no divine voices to decide our fate, only the silence of the cosmos and the fragile strength of our questions. And yet it was precisely from that void that the idea was born that the mind could walk on its own. That is why, on that day, in that borderland called Ionia, human thought changed forever.